It had been over 25 years since I last stepped foot in my hometown, a span of 25 years, 5 months, and 12 days to be precise. I left when I was 26, shattered and defeated. That departure came just one day after discovering that my wife of 3 years was pregnant, not with my child, but with her boss's. The moment she told me she was expecting, I knew the child wasn't mine, despite her best efforts to conceal the truth. Back then, we were young and struggling financially. The economy was tough, so I took a temporary job on a river barge along the Mississippi. It paid well for someone my age, but the work kept me away for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. My first stint ended up lasting 9. We had both agreed that the time apart was worth it since I would earn in 2 months what I typically made in 4. We were young and in love, or so I thought, and convinced we could handle the separation. Unfortunately, my wife only lasted 2 weeks before she started an affair with her boss, David Hollister, who owned an insurance company where she worked as an administrative assistant. As it turned out, she was the third assistant he'd had this kind of relationship with. David wielded considerable influence in our small town. When she eventually confronted him, his reaction was a smirk. "What are you going to do, Debbie?" he asked mockingly. "Ruin me? Sue me? I'm not married. The local judge is my brother-in-law, and you don't have 2 cents to hire a lawyer." The next day, he fired her after giving her a $1,000 severance package. By the time I returned home 2 weeks later, she had found a job as a waitress on the morning shift at a local diner. When she told me everything, her voice was heavy with remorse. For a solid 15 minutes, she apologized, then pivoted to pleading with me to use the $12,500 I'd earned on the barge to sue her former boss. "Tom, we can fix this," she begged. It didn't mean anything. I was just lonely. Her words tumbled out in a jumble as I stood there, silent and stone-faced. The claim that it didn't mean anything only reinforced my suspicion that she'd slept with him countless times during my absence. When she finally paused, I let out a bitter laugh, turned away, and spent the next hour doing laundry in silence. Then I packed my belongings and left for good. Cell phones were a luxury in the late 90s, so there was no way for her to contact me. That was the last time I saw or heard from her. I was consumed by anger, humiliation, and heartbreak, but I was also at a loss. As a young man with no real experience in such matters, I didn't know what action to take, if any. My parents had passed away, and with my only sibling living in Chicago, there was nothing tying me to Hannibal, Missouri. After completing one more stint on the barge, I bought a used Ford F-150 pickup and headed west. Over the next 2 decades, I pieced together a new life. For 3 years, I worked as an accountant in Denver, during which I earned a degree in finance. Being single, or at least living like a bachelor, afforded me plenty of time to study, so I finished the program in just over 2 years. I never discovered whether Debbie divorced me. I assumed she did, but never bothered to confirm. Armed with credentials and a bit of savings, I continued westward until I settled in Bend, Oregon. I didn't know a soul there, but after some research, I decided it was the perfect place for a fresh start. Summers were filled with golf and mountain biking, winters with skiing. Most importantly, it felt far enough removed from Hannibal that I could truly begin anew. I opened a small investment brokerage, and within 10 years, I had 3 junior partners and administrative staff, earning nearly $200,000 annually. My life was thriving. I made great friends and dated often, but I never seriously considered marriage again. Debbie's betrayal had left scars I couldn't ignore. When colleagues asked why I wasn't interested in settling down, I would shrug and offer a vague response like, "It's just not for me." Though I worked hard to focus on the good in life, I couldn't completely escape the memories of my past. From time to time, I thought of Debbie. After all, we'd spent 5 years together, and for most of that time, I believed she was the person I'd spend forever with. Her infidelity and pregnancy had been a devastating revelation. Now, at 51, I find myself on a flight from Portland to St. Louis en route to Hannibal for the first time in decades. Why? Because a lawyer recently contacted me about a modest inheritance left by a long-lost uncle on my mother's side. Although I could have handled everything remotely, I decided to revisit my roots one last time. Settling into my first class seat, a splurge, since I'm set to inherit around $40,000, I struck up a conversation with the young woman next to me, Tabitha. She appeared to be about 25 and was returning home after visiting friends in Bend, a trip her mother had gifted her for her birthday. By the time we were flying over Nebraska, we were chatting like old friends. Tabitha shared that her mom had been single when she was born, but later married a high school teacher. That marriage ended disastrously after he was imprisoned for inappropriate behavior with students. When Tabitha was 12, her mom remarried, this time to a local businessman. But 6 years ago, her mom caught him with his secretary, ending her second marriage. As Tabitha spoke, it became clear that her mom's experiences had left a mark on her ability to form stable relationships. Despite her challenges, Tabitha adored her mom and visited her monthly. She had earned a degree in accounting and now worked in St. Louis. As we sipped wine and exchanged stories, I found myself reflecting on the twists and turns of life and the paths we take to start anew. I noticed a certain spark in her eyes that drew me in, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, so I chose to let it go. She asked me some questions about my past, and I gave her a general overview, deliberately leaving out the specifics about my early marriage and subsequent separation. Discussing that chapter of my life, especially with a young woman nearly half my age whom I had just met on a flight, was not something I wanted to do. She seemed content with what I shared and didn't press for more. As we approached Kansas City with about an hour left in the flight, I began to sense that Tabitha might have unresolved issues regarding her father. Though we'd only had a couple of glasses of wine, her demeanor grew more forward, and she leaned in during our conversation in a way that crossed into flirtation. When she commented on the absence of a wedding ring, her tone suggested she might be testing the waters, curious if I could be interested in her. I have to admit, it felt flattering. I'm in good shape and fairly sociable, but the idea of a 25-year-old being interested in someone old enough to be her father seemed improbable. By now, Tabitha was touching my arm and hinted that she had a couple of free days before returning to work. She invited me to accompany her to Hannibal, mentioning that she could surprise her mom with a visit and show me how much the town had changed. Her tone carried an undeniable undertone, leaving little doubt about her intentions. One of my favorite sayings is, "I may not be much to look at, but I'm no fool." When we landed, I decided to buy her a ticket for the short flight from St. Louis to Hannibal and ensured we were seated together on the small plane. The lack of first class seating didn't matter since the flight was only 40 minutes. As the plane ascended, the cabin lights dimmed and the evening darkness enveloped us. That's when Tabitha leaned in and kissed me. The kiss wasn't timid. It was intense, carrying a fiery passion. Her hand wandered over my shoulder, and her sultry whisper in my ear sent my thoughts racing. "Oh, Daddy, you seem like you have some issues I can help with. Don't worry, I'll take care of you when we land," she murmured. Her boldness caught me off guard, but I played along, taking her hand and responding, "If you keep misbehaving, young lady, I'll have to teach you a lesson when we get there." Her whispered reply, full of teasing heat, was, "I certainly hope so." The plane landed 20 minutes later, though to me, it felt like hours. I had rented a cozy VRBO near the Mississippi River, not far from town. It was too late for her to visit her mom, and neither of us wanted to part ways just yet. Tabitha decided to stay the night, agreeing that her mother didn't need to know about me or us just yet. Once inside, the chemistry between us reignited immediately. I pressed her gently against the wall, holding her hands above her head, with one hand as the other traced her shoulder, her blouse shifting slightly as I leaned in. Our breaths mingled and our lips met in a deep, natural kiss. She sighed softly, appreciating the tenderness, before pulling away to insist on taking a shower after our long travel day. I jokingly offered to help her, but she grinned mischievously and said I'd have to wait my turn. While she used the master bathroom's deep tub to unwind, I took a quick shower in the guest bathroom and then stretched out on the bed, waiting for her. When she emerged, her casual yet playful outfit complemented her confident energy, lighting up the room. Leaning against the doorframe, she teased, "Think you can handle some fun before we crash for the night?" I chuckled, warmed by her playful nature, and responded, "I think I can manage." What followed was an evening of passion filled with intensity and connection. For 2 hours, we loved as though there was no tomorrow. By the end, I felt like the luckiest 51-year-old alive. As we drifted off to sleep, I held her close, reflecting that while she might have unresolved issues with her father, this weekend was about the joy of the moment. I was grateful to give and receive such happiness. The next morning, we showered together, sharing quiet intimacy before heading out for breakfast. Tabitha decided to call her mom after we ate, planning to meet her later in the day, while I met with the lawyer handling my uncle's estate. We agreed to meet that evening for dinner and drinks, and she suggested a restaurant, advising me to make a reservation since it might be busy. At 10 a.m., I arrived at Eric Hodge's office, located in the heart of the downtown shopping district. After exchanging pleasantries, Eric reviewed the estate details with me. The process was straightforward. My late uncle's will avoided many complications. Eric took copies of my ID and then read the will aloud. Shortly after, he handed me a check for $4,795. We chatted briefly about life before I left, feeling satisfied with how smoothly things had gone. As I rounded the corner to my car, I saw Tabitha a block away, walking alongside an older woman. They were laughing and chatting, completely unaware of my presence. My steps faltered as recognition struck me like lightning. It was Debbie, my ex-wife. Despite the years, I would have recognized her anywhere. In an instant, everything fell into place. Tabitha's eyes, so striking when we first met, were the same as her mother's. A wave of emotions surged through me: shock, confusion, anger, and disbelief. I watched them cross the street and enter a boutique, completely oblivious to me. As the realization set in, I found myself laughing quietly, almost hysterically, at the cruel irony of it all. After all these years, I had unknowingly slept with my ex-wife's daughter. The betrayal I had once agonized over seemed like a distant echo now, mingled with the absurdity of the present moment. Life, it seemed, had an unparalleled sense of humor. I decided to let it be. I knew there was no way to even the score. Whatever fate had in store for my unfaithful ex-wife would happen without my involvement. I refused to let her betrayal ruin me completely. Yes, I was deeply hurt, but I would find a way to move on, even if that meant abandoning any notions of revenge. However, as the situation played over in my mind, a laugh escaped me, not one of relief, but a dark, almost sinister chuckle. The realization struck me. I wasn't going to play the noble, forgiving ex-husband. Sure, I hadn't planned on stirring up old troubles, but now, with this opportunity before me, I felt a sense of vindictive glee. A better man might have let bygones be bygones, especially after so many years, but that wasn't me, not now. I wanted a sliver of retribution, and this was my chance. While I didn't intend to hurt Tabitha, I knew it might be unavoidable. I would try to spare her as much as I could. She wasn't to blame. Still, I wasn't going to let Debbie walk away unscathed. Crossing the street, I waited a short distance from the boutique's entrance. When they emerged, I approached them purposefully. What followed wasn't exactly a scene out of a Hallmark movie, but it was undoubtedly satisfying. "Tabitha, hey, Tabitha," I called out, waving. She looked up, startled, clearly caught off guard. We had agreed earlier that I wouldn't meet her mom, and her expression was a mix of shock and unease. At first, Debbie's reaction was neutral, the kind of polite curiosity you'd expect from a parent meeting their child's acquaintance. But as I drew closer, her expression shifted. Curiosity gave way to confusion, then recognition, and finally, disbelief. Her hand flew to her mouth as she gasped, "Oh my God, Tom?" Now it was Tabitha's turn to look bewildered. "Mom, you know him?" she asked, her tone tinged with embarrassment. Before Debbie could respond, I jumped in. "Hi, Debbie. It's been a while, hasn't it?" The words rolled off my tongue with a satisfying sharpness. Debbie stammered, "Tom, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And how do you know my daughter?" Tabitha interjected, her confusion growing. "Wait, Mom, you know Tom. Tom, you know my mom. What is happening?" I smiled, enjoying the moment. "Ladies, let me clarify. Tabitha, until 5 minutes ago, I had no idea your mother was my ex-wife. We didn't get into this on the plane, but I was married here many years ago. Debbie, feel free to jump in if I leave anything out." "No, great, I'll continue." Turning to Tabitha, I began, "Your mom was my first love. We were young, broke, but deeply in love. To make ends meet, I took a job on a river barge that kept me away for about 9 weeks. We knew it would be hard, but we believed in each other. Every day I was away, I thought about Debbie and our life together. I was ecstatic when I got my paycheck and rushed home to start our future for real. I paused for effect. Imagine my surprise when my loving wife told me she was pregnant with another man's child. I gestured toward Debbie, who looked as if the ground might swallow her whole. She didn't wait long. About 2 weeks after I left, she started sleeping with her boss. That would be your dad, David Hollister. Both women gasped. Oops, I said, feigning innocence. Debbie, you never told your daughter about her real father? That's unfortunate. Maybe that's why she struggles with certain issues. Debbie's face paled and Tabitha's confusion deepened. Ignoring their reactions, I continued, Your mom's affair destroyed me and any hope for our future in mere weeks. Her boss eventually paid her $1,000 to leave and keep quiet, not that it stopped her from continuing their affair. I left town shattered and spent years rebuilding my life. Shifting my attention to Debbie, I added, As for why I'm here, my late uncle left me a modest inheritance. I came back to settle the estate with no plans to look for you. Why would I want to reconnect with someone who treated me so callously? Returning to Tabitha, I said, On the flight, I met a delightful young woman, yourself. We had a great time talking, and I had no idea who your mother was. That night, we shared something remarkable. To be honest, Debbie, I can't remember you ever being that passionate or enthusiastic. Tabitha's face burned with humiliation as I continued. Tabitha, you're an incredible young woman, and I'm sorry you're caught in this. But your mother deserves to feel a fraction of the pain she caused me. That said, I bear no ill will toward you and would be happy to meet you for dinner tonight. No strings attached. Turning back to Debbie, I delivered my final blow. Debbie, your tears are a small taste of the agony you put me through. Your daughter is extraordinary and incredibly talented in ways you never were. I hope the thought of us together haunts you forever. Goodbye. Without another glance, I walked away, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders as Debbie's sobs faded behind me. Later that day, my phone buzzed. Daddy, Tabitha purred, are we still on for dinner? I've been so naughty. I yelled at my mom and need to make amends. I chuckled, shaking my head. Life, it seemed, had a way of coming full circle.